So to start this video, I'm going to be looking at my poster I have created, and then I'm going to be applying what I said into here and how it relates to my program. So beginning, we have our title. We need to also do this. I will after this video, but we're going to be creating a computer programming application that consists of it being an Uno game, basically. Our game process is we need to create a deck, create 4 players, deal 7 cards to each player. Player 1 withdraws and places a card matching the starting number or color. After this, all the methods loop until a player reaches 1 card and calls Uno. After this, once a player discards the last card, they win the game. There's more functions and processes within this. A lot of it is implemented into my code. Moving on to the next thing, we have our project overview, which is basically we are creating a text-based Uno game where a user can press enter to place each player's card. The game consists of each player competing against each other to place their last cards. So to begin this, we had started to create our classes, and this was in the beginning of our Uno game. We created an Uno game class, an Uno main, a card deck, a card class, and a deck class, and a player class. So within our Uno game, our main class for our game, this is where all our rules and the process of the game is applied. After this, we have our Uno main class, which is a class that basically allows one game to be ran at a time. There's other functions in there, I just didn't disclaim them. After this, we have a card class, which is a class that allows us to implement new cards within our Uno game. And then we have a deck class, a class that allows us to implement a deck that we will create in our Uno game. Moving on, we have a player class, which is a class that allows us to create a hand for our players, and so on and so forth, that anything has to do with the players. I was supposed to create a hand class, but me and my tutor had talked about it, and we came up with just using player as a class because it's similar to a hand. Moving on to our procedure, let me pull out this screenshot. So what we first need to do is we need to create our variables and our fills. So within the screenshot, this is basically everything that we've created before we start our method and start the process of the game. Moving on to step 2, we're going to be creating a deck, players, and the player's hand. So if I get this screenshot, which is also this screenshot, and the other one before, and the previous was the first step screenshot. So within the screenshot, we have basically we're creating a new deck right here. We have loops that are going to basically create our cards. We have our cards created here, so we have reverse, skip, +2, wild, and wild +4. After this, we have deck.shuffle, which is going to shuffle our deck. And then we are going to deal 7 cards to the players, which is basically the player's hand. Moving on, we're going to be going into step 3, and let's see if I can copy this. And within our step 3, what we have is we're going to begin creating the game rules applies to how the game will run. So basically everything within this screenshot is basically the functions of our games. There's more to it, but that's basically a general idea of what we're going to do. So the result is the final upfront result of our program consists of our program or our user pressing enter to play the game. Within our console output, we are informed of the card the previous player has placed along with the card that the current player has placed. Each function outputs what has been done within the process. So what I mean by this is, if we have an example here. So player 4 placed card value skip, color equals blue, on card value +2, color equals blue. So because they placed a skip card, player 1 would then be skipped, and this is what I mean by each function outputs what has been done within the process. So because player 1 placed a skip card, player 1 is going to be skipped, and that's going to be output into our console so the users understand what's going on. And then after this, it's going to be moving on to player 2, and then player 2 is going to be placing a wild +4, color on skip, color blue. So after this, player 2 changes the color to red because they then choose what color it is. It's going to be a randomized number, or not a randomized number, randomized color instead. After this, player 3 draws 4 cards because player 2 had placed wild +4. So moving on, I'm going to be opening up our Java project, and basically we have our card class that allows us to be able to create our cards with the color and value, and then we have our deck that is going to allow us to create our deck, add new cards to it, shuffle the deck, and basically deal out the cards to the players. So then we have the players, which is the player's hand, and then we also have a little sys out right here that allows us to print a message for a specific player, and that's how each one of these is output into our console. Moving on to our main, this basically allows us to only have one application open of the game, so there's not multiple applications running. Moving on to the game, we have our variables and our fields that we created, and basically everything that we're going to apply within our code. So as described in my poster, we have a for loop, which is basically going to create our cards for us. We then have the if statements, which are our colors, the reverse, skip +2, wild, and wild +4. Then the deck shuffle, we have our players.draw.deck.deal, which basically allows us to deal 7 cards to the player. Each one of these represents a card. Moving on, we have a method to create the instance only available in this package. After this, we have a Boolean card match, which basically checks if the card on the top of the deck matches the specified card. And if it does, it returns true if it does. Moving on, we have set the next player to whatever is needed to be. And moving on, we have flip who will go next with reverse Boolean value. So if a user is to place a reverse card, it will then flip and then go into a different rotation for the game to play in. So which for example is right here. So the next one is we're going to ignore the next natural user and move on to the next person. So this is for our skip card. And moving on, we have our +2, which adds a random card to the next player, then skips their turn, and also it has these functions of where it outputs what process is happening. After this, we have our wild card, which is going to change the color to a random player. There's really no logic behind it. It's basically just a random color that the program will be choosing, because we don't have any GUIs or anything for the user to be able to click what color they'd like. And when I was working with my friend, I've been getting a lot of help within this project. I'm told to cite everything that I use. So for example, I needed to use a function and I didn't know the function I needed to use, so I went on Google, searched it up, and then found the function basically of what I needed to use, and then here I cite where I got the function from. So there's creditation. Moving on, we have wild +4, and it basically changes the color to a random number and places +4 cards into the next player's inventory. After this, we have press enter to progress in the game, which basically means each time you want to run the player and for them to place a card, you just press enter within the console. After this, we have the top card deck, which basically normally the top card is set randomly, but for the sake of simplicity, it is set to green. So basically, I had created a function that allows us. Actually, this was the function, sorry, but I should remove that. I should have removed that comment earlier. So basically, what this function does now is that it allows the program to place a random card instead of it being a specified number and colored card. So the first card that's placed from our card pile is going to be randomized. After this, here's the main logic loop. This keeps running until a winner is decided. So this basically everything within here will keep on being looped and looped until somebody wins. The game should only deal with the current player, which is player 1, player 2, player 3, etc. How we deal cards is with this array that we have created, which is player.getHand. After this, we have, if the card's color or amounts match, it can be placed, which basically allows the user to place a card if the color or the value of it matches. If not, then they won't be able to place the card. After this, if the player does win, then it'll say player.say win. So basically player 1, 2, 3, or 4 will win, and it will output it into the console. This block is ran if none of the cards in the player's hand are able to be placed. So if there is no card for the player to place, the player would then pick up a card, and then it would be the next player's turn. If a player does have one card, the player would then say Uno. The game automatically implements it, so if one person does have one card, it's going to automatically say Uno. Player.set hand card, set the hand back for the player with the updated cards. After this, we have, this block is only ran if the card placed is, if the card placed is our own. So we don't use an if else statement because placed can become true in the previous if statement. And that's basically everything that's within my classes and within my game and how my game runs. So if I am to just spam click all of this, it obviously comes up with player 1 wins because player 1 says Uno, player 4 draws 2 cards, player 3 plays skip, which skip plays 2, and then player 1 plays their last card on top of the skip, which means player 1 wins. So other than that, that's the end of this video. And yes.